right, I am here today with Jason Lauritsen. I've worked with Jason in the past, colleague, friend, also the author of Unlocking High Performance. Jason has a background in HR management and also worked for Quantum Workplace. I guess worked with them on their Great Place to Work research. Thank you so much for coming by and spending time with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just jump right in. The first question is, how have we gotten here when it comes to performance and performance management?
Origins of performance management start clear back when we were sort of in industrialization and all these, manufacturing jobs were coming up and people were moving to the cities, and working conditions initially were terrible because we never done work like this before. And so people were getting exploited and all this, and that gave rise to employees organizing and creating labor unions. And as the labor unions sort of rose in power and started negotiating, right, work became very literally guided by a contract, right? They negotiate a contract. Ultimately, what happened out of that was born kind of this legacy of management that we have, which is we treat and think of work as a contract with the employee.
So we talked a lot about the history and the background of how we got here, but if we broke it down a little deeper with what we're doing today, what are some of the fundamental issues with the systems that are in place and that we're using today?
Employee engagement data, no matter whose you look at, says that the biggest drivers of engagement are things like feeling valued and trust and being cared for and appreciated at work and all those things. Those are all relational constructs. They exist in the context of a relationship. And so I think what that says is that employees experience work more like a relationship than anything else. When you think about the stuff inside of our performance processes, it's contractual enforcement. It's not designed to foster and advance the relationship. And until it is, it will always be broken.
How about developing the individual? You talked about what people are looking for in engagement. What we're seeing a lot of it is one of the biggest drivers of engagement is personal development.
Sure.
Aside from the performance itself, is there a component that's around the development of the individual?
I don't think we've been particularly successful in driving development through performance practices. And I think that's largely a failure on feedback. It doesn't matter what your performance process is. It doesn't matter what your technology is. If you have people that can't give one another feedback in a constructive way, it doesn't matter.
Agreed. There was something that jumped out at me in the book around the relationship between these performance systems, performance development, management, whatever you're going to call it, and the employee experience.
Yep.
And that was really poignant. I'd love to ask you or just hear more about that.
The key to unlocking high performance at work is to create an employee experience that feels like a healthy relationship to the employee. Because when we're in a healthy relationship, we perform better. I mean, if you think about, best friend or your wife or whatever, how you show up for them, what you do for them, how committed you are, all those things, same stuff we want at work. And so performance management, I think, when done correct, it's like the operating system for work in the organization. So performance management isn't a form, it's not an approach, it's not a meeting, it's not any of those things. It is a system of processes that creates an experience of work consistently for that employee that feels like a healthy relationship. So it feels fulfilling and uplifting, and that motivates the employee to better performance, higher, more loyalty, greater commitment, more creativity.
Okay, so I'm going to go on a side tangent here.
Okay.
Around the term performance management. I know that there's some people that feel like we should shift that. What are your thoughts about that around rethinking how we refer to this?
Performance management, because of bad practice, has turned into something that has a negative connotation. I would challenge us as leaders, as HR, as an industry, as technologists, to reclaim the word, right? To make it what it should be. Because at the end of the day, performance is the organizational imperative. That's why we exist. We exist to perform. Without that, we don't need to be an organization. We don't need to be here. And so if we can't talk about managing performance, what are we doing? Yeah. What are we doing? So we have to talk about managing performance or performance management.
What about the time, there is the day comes when you need to sit down with your manager for the performance review? Anything you saw in that system around the performance review process that can be tweaked or modified?
There's nothing that says that we have to do an annual performance review. Yeah. Zero. That is a contractual construct. I think the places that have really taken the performance review process and reinvented it have done it in ways that it's lightweight, Manager and employee, they jointly own the process. It's an ongoing conversation throughout the year that evolves as work. They can change as things change. They give agency both to the manager and the employee in the process.
I love where you landed there. And what's coming for me is, if our review is backward looking, it is about the contract, right?
Always.
But the performance review process could be shifted, and I think you just hit on this, to forward thinking.
One of the approaches that I've been advocating for, that I saw, Marshall Goldsmith, I think, was the first one that popularized the term feed forward, and feedback is always backwards looking and critical, which triggers a response in your brain that is very similar to physical pain. Feed forward basically just is like, hey, it's more about providing suggestions. So instead of looking backwards and saying, hey Craig, can I give you some feedback about the interview? It's, hey Craig, would you be open to some ideas about some things you might do in the next interview to even make it better?
Okay, so I'm an executive. I know I have to do something differently in my organization. I'm sensing that. If you were to give me 2 or 3 pointers on things that I should be thinking about, really succinct, what would you share with me? I'm struggling with this as an executive. What would you say?
Invest your energy in creating clarity, creating processes that create clarity around expectations and goals for everyone in the organization. Probably 80% of performance issues and underperformance can be tracked back to a lack of clarity at the beginning. And then reprogram your organization around feedback. And even just give them permission to stop feedback and start doing feed forward. Like teach them to coach and invest in those 2 things. Everything else will sort itself out.
All right, Jason, thank you very much. I really appreciate you taking the time to spend with us. Again, Jason's book, Unlocking High Performance. If this is something you're thinking about, this is a great read, very insightful. I appreciate you taking the time, and thank you for having this conversation with us.
Thanks for having me, man. It's always a pleasure.